Hello, Christine.
Bring it up.
Hello?
Hello, Christine. Can you speak any louder than that?
No, I'm yelling.
Oh, that's fine. Just yell at that level and we're okay.
Okay, there goes 1 minute to air.
Okay, I'm going to put you back on hold. Why don't you lift it off, the thing, so we don't put it on hold? Lift it off.
30-second count.
I'll put it on hold here, but after you've lifted up the thing.
30-second count to your first ENG, right? When do you want to go to Christine, Jack?
I'm going to Christine immediately after the film clip.
We're going to Christine.
I'm going to keep this line open at this end.
Okay.
Good morning. The end of the Trudeau era came with sudden starkness only 45 minutes ago when a hurriedly called press conference said that Trudeau is quitting. Now just think what that does. If the Tories called an election now, the Liberals would have no leader. The Liberals didn't call an election now. The fact of the matter is that Trudeau has stunned the political animals of this nation by walking away. And here's what he said at his press conference 45 minutes ago.
I'm stepping down from the leadership and asking the national executive of the party to call a convention for next March to choose a new leader. There's no easy way or ideal time to leave, and there are always strong public and private reasons, both for going and for staying on. At a point in time, one simply makes the decision as to what is best. I will turn over a healthy party to my successor. We have 114 energetic and dedicated members of Parliament who in many cases have been my friends and colleagues since I came to Ottawa. Many senators have also been loyal supporters. I'm grateful to them and to all the Liberals throughout the land for having given me such an extraordinary opportunity to serve my country.
Quite an extraordinary statement at this time and this place. And on the telephone from Ottawa, I have our reporter who was at the press conference, Christine Hearn. What was the tone, what was the feeling in the press conference? One of shock?
There seemed to be a great deal of shock, particularly among the reporters. We only knew 15 minutes before the announcement that there was going to be any announcement at all. There hadn't been the usual spate of rumors. There were a number of former cabinet ministers present, Robert Andras, John Munro, 2 or 3 senators, including BC's Ray Perrault. They were very, very quiet, very, very subdued, and very, very surprised.
Has a date been given, suggested yet, for a new leadership convention for the Liberal Party, Christine?
Yes, Trudeau has asked the party to call a leadership convention sometime in March.
March. That's still 4 or 5 months away. Are there only 2 automatic candidates who will in fact be considered by the Liberal brass for the leadership of the now truncated party?
I think they'd consider anybody who cares to step forward. I think they're going to have a lot of time to gather together an awful lot of people to try and figure out who the replacement will be.
I was told this morning, whether it's totally accurate or not, Christine, that he told his staff when he came in this morning that he'd decided to go because there had to be someone better than him to do the job. Have you picked up that at all?
That's quite possible. He's obviously not had his heart in being opposition leader. He doesn't seem to enjoy it. He doesn't seem to have any fun with it. He said that he thought long and hard about stepping down, particularly in light of the Quebec referendum. But he said there's no right time to leave, and that he felt the party would have a better chance of renewal with somebody different.
That's what he said this morning, but how many times, Christine Hearn, has he said that he would not leave until the Quebec PQ referendum had been securely and soundly defeated on behalf of the Federalists?
He said that a number of times, but that was before he became opposition leader. And it appears now, from this vantage point anyway, that the referendum is likely to be defeated. Joe Clark has adopted this stance of holding still and not giving Quebec anything to shoot at, and the feeling coming out of Quebec is very much that the referendum is going to fail.
We know that there has been considerable upset and unrest among the Western Liberals, both in the Winnipeg meeting and in the Vancouver meeting just 10 days ago. Is there the same unrest among the Quebec Liberals, the federal Liberals in Quebec?
No, the Quebec Liberals seem to be just as solidly behind Trudeau and behind the party as they ever were. But they're as concerned as everybody else that the party could develop into a party that exists only in Quebec, in which case it wouldn't have a chance.
You know, I've got a feeling that one of the things which may have upset our kind of ephemeral former Prime Minister, if that's the right word, is the fuss that the media made about the disco trip with Linda. Remember, you told us he was supposed to have a cold and finished up at the disco in New York with a girl called Linda. Is that the kind of thing that could really have tipped him over the edge and caused his resignation this very morning?
I don't really think so. I think that was perhaps more of an indication that he'd already almost made up his mind that he was going to step down. So why should he bother having a weekend in British Columbia when he could be just going in New York? I think rather than the media fuss, that was a symptom of what was going to happen.
Oh, you're probably right. I noticed he said this morning that there are always very private, strong reasons to go and private, strong reasons to stay. His family troubles must have borne some weight in his decision one way or the other, the way.
I would think so. He's always been very close to his 3 children. It's been said for years that he does get along better with children than with anybody else. His boys are reaching the age when they're in elementary school. They need full-time parents, and they seem to only have a full-time father. Margaret is sometimes here and sometimes in New York and sometimes other places, and I think he has probably decided that now is the time when he must devote more time to them.
So what we can look for now is the creation of the camps of the big boys. Donald MacDonald, a former finance minister, who said he wasn't willing to run and who quit for personal reasons when he was finance minister, and John Turner. Is Turner still standing in the wings like always the bridesmaid but never the bride, and this time trying to make it go as the bride?
Yes, he was apparently very much in evidence at the weekend Ontario Liberal Convention. He was keeping a very low profile, but he was very, very visible. He was there everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the end of an era, Christine, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Do you think he'll go out as a beaten man or not as a beaten man?
I think he'll go out as a beaten man for the moment, perhaps, but I think in retrospect, when everybody has a chance 20 or 30 years down the line to look at it, I think he'll perhaps be seen as one of the great prime ministers.
Did he take many questions at the press conference this morning, Christine?
He took no questions. It was a straight statement, and that was it.
Just a statement, out, up, and away.
That's right.
But he'll be in the House, I presume, on his normal duties between now and March.
One presumes, yes.
Christine Hearn, thank you very much. We'll watch for your more detailed reports on the news hour.
Now the preliminaries are underway.
Thank you very
and
much.
For a while, the
Christine
fields
Hearn,
belong to
our
the drag
reporters
boy.
from Parliamentary Press
Across the
Gallery
hills,
in
the
Ottawa.
huntsmen
Thanks,
and their horses assembled.
Webster, more on the Trudeau bombshell after this break. In case you just tuned in, the fact of the matter is that 55 minutes ago, Pierre Trudeau walked into the National Press Theatre, beautifully dressed, beautifully attired, made a very simple March 1980. And so he's away. I have interviewed Pierre Trudeau, I suppose, 7 or 8 times, maybe 10 times in the past 10 years. Let me tell you, he was the toughest man to interview, the toughest man to pin down, the toughest man to even attempt to corner because of his superior debating skills and intellect. Didn't make him the best prime minister in the world, but he was a man of considerable power and presence, and in the old days, before he became disinterested, considerable charisma. Let's look at it politically just for a moment. Only the day before yesterday, the balance in the House of Commons, if the Tories had the support of the handful of social creditors they bipartisan majority, 141. And if you're Newchap, if that's his name from the pays home to open another bank, it's even Steven, 140 each way. Liberals 92, versus the Tories, and the Social Credit. Well, what happens now? The Liberals have no leader as of this very moment. They do not have a leader who can go into an election campaign. Ipso facto, no leader. Joe Clark, who will be here by happenstance on Friday morning, is now faced with the happy for him circumstance that he can be totally sure in his mind that the Liberals will not gang up to defeat him when they have no leader. So he's secure from defeat by the Liberals between now and next fall. Because once you get a leader, you've got to establish them, organize them, put them across the country, and rebuild the Trudeau said in the statement. There's one other option open to Joe Clark. He could go for broke and call an election sooner, before the Liberals are ready. But then again, you can't have midwinter elections in Canada. The country is too big and too cold. And the other point is that Joe is determined that his mortgage tax credit arrangement will be passed before. Again, the Liberals are going to be in a terrible bite in that they cannot really knock down any major Conservative legislation, or they will defeat the government and not have a leader to run for an election. So the whole political picture has changed considerably in Canada in the last hour, now 58 minutes ago. And Joe, I presume, can now sit down and plan his strategy and his, what he's going to do with great calmness and confidence, you might say.
We are the highest paid woodworkers in the world, and we can't afford to buy a house in British Columbia today. That's what's wrong.
We can get perhaps some specific answers from Prime Minister Clark. Very first time I interviewed Trudeau, when he was Minister of Justice, no, when he was Prime Minister, way back in '68, I said to him, Cabinet colleagues, your friends say that if you're ever up against the combined opposition of the Cabinet, you will get up and walk away. At that time he said to me, I wouldn't put it past myself to do such a thing. And that was Trudeau. When I interviewed him last March, we had an interesting little interchange in this very studio when I asked him about what might happen in the last. What's the best you can hope for in this election, sir? A strong bloc from Quebec, very few from the West, and a minority government?
That's certainly not the best I can hope for, Jack. If I were only hoping for that, I may as well lie down and die. I'm hoping for a strong mandate from all parts of Canada in order to put forth this concept of Canada I've been developing on this program.
But you'd hate to be the leader of the opposition in the House of Commons and might not even sit there.
I might not even sit there.
As leader of the opposition.
Look, I respect the voice of the people. I'm a great believer in that old cliche about vox populi, vox dei. You know, if the people want something, I will abide by their will.
I hate to say it, but I was right. Vox populi, vox dei meant voice of the people, the voice of God, that he was to be leader of the opposition. But he didn't do it. And he lasted until today. He finishes in March. It's quite a tragedy in its own way, because the man undoubtedly was superior in most of his attitudes. The trouble was, in my view, he never worked hard enough. I never paid enough attention. Perhaps it's because his background, and I say with all the grace and favour I can muster at my command, was that he'd never really had to work a day in his life and wasn't really in touch with the ordinary common people. He did some great things for this country. He tried very hard. In fact, he over-tried on a number of occasions. He's gone, he's away, he's finished. I don't know how much Disco Linda had to do with it. Christine Hearn doesn't think so. Christine Hearn thinks that was that he had already decided to go. I say now, principal fight between the big boys of the English-speaking section of the Liberal Party, Donald MacDonald, if he can come back, and what's the name of the other fellow? John Turner, the finance minister. On the telephone right now from Ottawa, I've got Vancouver's Liberal MP from Vancouver, Art Phillips. Art!
Hello, Jack.
Can you hear me, Art? All right.
Yes, I can.
Art, what is your instant reaction to the rather stunning news this morning that Trudeau is quitting as of March?
Well, like everybody else, I was quite stunned. He came into the caucus and quietly read out, or started to read out, a prepared statement, and it was an extraordinarily emotional few minutes. I think all of us felt very emotional towards the man because he's an outstanding individual, and as you know, he has a shy, emotional, vulnerable side to him which the public doesn't really know. And so we all felt very strongly towards him. As I say, it was quite an extraordinary few minutes.
I gathered that he told the caucus just before, after he told his staff, and just before he went to the press conference in the National Press Theatre.
Yes.
Can you remember any of the things he said? Did he say anything there that he didn't say to the press?
Well, I don't know what he said to the press, but he didn't really say very much to the caucus because it was difficult for him to say it. He was really quite emotional about it. He simply got out a few sentences about the last 12 years and stepping down, and that he thought that the National Executive should make the March convention, which had been tentatively set, a leadership convention, and that was about it.
Yes, okay, fair enough. Was he in tears? Dare I ask if he was in tears? Nothing wrong with that.
Well, yeah, his voice was quite choked, and his eyes were quite watery. You know, he was very emotional. He did also say, and I think probably this was the hardest thing for him to say, that it had been a great privilege and an honor to have been the Prime Minister and the leader of the party for 12 years. Etc., and that's when it was really quite tough for him to carry on.
I had thought myself, and perhaps you could confirm this, that his promise to, or at least his commitment to stay until after the referendum had been defeated in Quebec, meant that he was bound to stay until at least the latter part of this year, the latter part of next year, 1980.
Well, I had sort of assumed that he would stay on as leader until after the Quebec referendum, which is planned for around about May of next year. And then after that, I thought that he might announce his resignation at any time, depending on how things were going and how he felt. But I was quite caught by surprise at his announcement today.
I checked my political thinking, please, Art, and you're a pretty experienced pragmatist in the subject. Does this move today mean that your Liberal Party, even with the aid of the NDP, cannot now make any move to defeat the Conservatives because you would be leaderless in a snap election?
Well, yes, that's true, and in my judgment, we shouldn't have done so anyhow. And I feel that it would have been wrong to precipitate an election this winter. And I felt that the reaction to our last non-confidence effort was a negative reaction, and I certainly did not want to see us repeat that. I also think it precludes Joe Clark from calling an election until after the Liberals choose their next leader.
Yeah, it might be we can't have a winter election, and that wouldn't be cricket to call an election against the leaderless Liberal Party, would it?
That's right. I think it would be considered quite unethical and contrary to our normal practice, and I would imagine the public would punish whoever would call an election under those circumstances.
One final question, Art. Will you be a candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party in March?
Well, Jack, I haven't got any plans for that. I will give it some consideration because a lot of people have asked me about it, and I'm not quite sure when I will be able to reach a conclusion and make an announcement one way or another. This has caught me as much by surprise as it has everyone else.
My thanks to Art Phillips, Vancouver Liberal MP. Thank you very much, Art.
Hey, Jack.
Bye, bye, bye. Webster and Trudeau. Should I take some phone calls? I have one more clip I'm going to do. I might take some instant phone calls from people, political observers, after the break. On the telephone from his Senate office in Ottawa, I've got Senator Ray Perrault. Ray, I presume that, Senator Perrault, I presume you only learned, maybe you knew yesterday this was going to happen.
Well, Jack, as leader of the Liberals in the Senate, I'm a member of Shadow Cabinet, and I can tell you we were not informed. We were informed only, or at least I was informed, about 15 minutes before caucus that there would be a major announcement made at caucus, probably by the Prime Minister, and we should all be on standby.
Were you stunned?
Beg pardon?
Were you shocked?
Yes, I was shocked because only a week ago the leader of the party suggested that he felt that it would be a responsibility to stay on until at least the referendum. There were many stories around here, Jack, and I think you know that the leader had been thinking in terms of stepping down sometime next year, but certainly there was no suggestion that it would be this soon.
What do you think caused him to make the sudden decision? It couldn't have been the criticism of the appearance in the disco in New York, could it?
I don't think that was a factor. I think that he felt that in view of the fact that we'd done extremely well in recent by-elections, including the provincial by-elections in the province of Quebec, in view of the fact that the separatists had been dealt quite a severe blow, that perhaps the time was now. And there could have been personal reasons involved as well that we know nothing about.
Maybe he has a sufficient confidence in Ryan that Ryan can handle the referendum without his assistance.
No, well, that may be part of it, but let me tell you, he's made it quite clear here today that he believes he has the responsibility to work as an active participant in the fight for national unity during that referendum campaign.
In other words, he'll be out in the hustings perhaps as Mr. Trudeau.
Yes, that's right.
As plain Pierre.
He has even told people on the Hill today, not at any news conference, but he said that he thinks he can be, under the present circumstances, he can be even more effective in the referendum fight as Mr. Trudeau than as Prime Minister or as leader of a political party.
Senator Perrault, you do sound to me a bit disappointed that he did it at this time.
Well, I think that he's the best person to judge that situation. I'm surprised because most of the party caucuses in the country, the Western Caucus, Atlantic Caucus, and so on, supported the view that he should stay on until the referendum and the leadership convention, if we were to have one, or the national convention, if we were to have one, should be in the fall. And that was the position of BC Liberals as well. So it comes as a surprise. But
who will you back for the leadership, Mr. Perrault?
Well, we have a number of good ones. You know, the old theory that a party doesn't have any possible leaders, well, the theory just doesn't work. The Conservatives were saying the same thing when they looked around the landscape, and Joe Clark emerged, and Liberals felt the same way when Mike Pearson resigned and Mr. Trudeau emerged. I think we have some good candidates, and there's some good people out west, and there's some good people in eastern Canada. I think there will probably be, I would say 7 or 8 candidates.
But you won't name MacDonald and/or Turner as the only possible alternative.
MacDonald in. I wouldn't be surprised to see John Turner in. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bryce Mackesy in, and a number of others, possibly Art Phillips and Lloyd Axworthy.
Well, Bryce Mackesy can certainly afford to campaign with his big settlement if he gets it from Air Canada.
Well, you mean he may have some campaign funds?
Yeah.
Well, Bryce was on the Hill a few days ago shaking hands, and that's always a sign and portent.
How about Ray Perrault? No, you couldn't do it because you're a senator.
I don't aspire to such a lofty position,
Well, it's the end of an era, Mr. Perrault, isn't it?
Beg pardon?
It's the end of an era.
It's the end of an era, and Jack, you know, the fact is that he's won 3 elections since 1968. He almost won one in 1979. For a politician, that's a great track record. That's a pretty high batting average. And there are many Liberals around this country who feel a great sense of personal loyalty to Mr. Trudeau. I think history is going to rate him as one of the best prime ministers we've had and one of the great party leaders. We're a little too close to his time of service in office for all Canadians to really appreciate that fact.
One final point. Is it not a fact, Senator Ray Perrault, long-time political strategist and experienced in all the tricks and devilment of politics, that there cannot now be an election caused by the Liberals at least until the fall of 1980?
Jack, I think that's a good assessment because you're a good political strategist in your own right. I think the analysis is I don't think the Conservatives would embarrass the Liberal Party into an election in the near future, and I don't think that we're really interested in disrupting the country until 1980. No, I don't think so.
So therefore Trudeau's resignation at least gives the country some political stability until the fall of next year.
Jack, we need political stability right now. I don't think people want another campaign. It costs a lot of money, and there are enough uncertainties in Canadian life at the present time than to plunge this nation into another election. But I want to tell you, the caucus today was a very emotional event. people who talk in terms of sort of the hard-hearted Trudeau and the hard-hearted Liberal politicians, there was a lot of emotion flowing there today, and I want to tell you that.
A lot of tears. A few tears as well.
What I've said to you.
There'll be a few tears as well, I've no doubt.
A lot of tears today, and he was given the longest standing ovation I've ever heard in my time in public life, and I've been around a while.
You certainly have.
And it was heartfelt.
Ray Perrault, I'm grateful for your cooperation and your observations on Webster this morning, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Ray. Webster after this break. When Christine phoned me this morning, Christine Hearn, before we got the press conference, I nearly fell off my chair. You know, but it happened. And if you just tuned in, Trudeau this morning at 11:15 Ottawa time, 8:15 Vancouver time, said, I'm through, I'm finished, I'm done. What have we learned in the way of chit-chat now that Trudeau is in effect gone? Perrault, Senator Ray Perrault, agrees with my proposition. It means that we're going to have some form of stability in government. There cannot possibly be a federal election caused by the Liberals prior to the fall of next year, probably the year after. It's generally conceded that if Mr. Clark called an election now, it would be dirty tricks if he called it while the Liberals had no leader. In any case, he's not going to call it in the middle of winter, because people who call elections in Canada in the winter don't do so well. I think the history books will show. We've also learned just briefly that Art Phillips is considering whether or not he will present himself as a leadership candidate, and that's something. I wish I had, I think I've got one more clip of Trudeau, my very first broadcast on this station, where something quite interesting comes out as I talk to Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It was the opening broadcast on the Webster program in October 1978. This happened. Mr. Prime Minister.
Jack.
Simple, friendly, personal question. How's your health?
That's great. Always has been, always will be, Jack. You look pretty good yourself.
You've had 10 very tough years, and now you're sitting at a crisis in both the affairs of the nation and perhaps in your political life. Don't you feel a little bit edgy?
No, because I wouldn't describe it as a crisis. I would describe it as a normal evolution, coming together of various threads which are obliging people now to make decisions. And I don't call that a crisis. I call it a great opportunity. We're faced in our political history and our economic life, we're faced with very basic decisions, and I like that. I like people to choose. I don't like them to sit on the fence.
I can't let you away that easy, Mr. Prime Minister. You know, the reports of your political death or resignation may be exaggerated, but I've never, in all your years as Prime Minister, seen the Westalls, the Gwynns, the Fotheringhams, not your enemies particularly, after your throat that maybe you should quit. Maybe it's time you left. Now, give me a gut response to that, Mr.
Well, I just remember that in 1972, the Tories were on the verge of taking over, and the press had discounted me as a future Prime Minister, and the same thing in 1974. And somehow, in spite of these people, I managed to come back with the Liberal Party. So why not again, Jack?
There was only one thing wrong with that question. My question, gently put to the Prime Minister, as he was at the time, it was 1 year too soon. There was I in October 1978 asking him if he was going to quit. And he finally quits. And what is the date today?
21st.
November the 21st, 1979. It's always kind of sad when a guy, mind you, he's almost as old as I am. It's time he retired anyway. Where am I going? I want to take a couple of calls. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Ray.
What do you make of it? Let's keep it short and sharp and breezy and no tears.
That I, as a woman, noticed, I don't know whether you may have caught this, was that he did say, no matter where I am, which to me, as a woman, made me feel that he did not wish to be in Ottawa. He has been under considerable embarrassment with his estranged wife, who has recently bought a new home in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I feel that has something to do with it.
I wouldn't be the least surprised.
This is my own personal feeling.
Good. It's the timing which is so unusual.
I'm very sorry to hear it.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
What I'm about to say, I want to say as a Tory who was most outspoken against Mr. Trudeau in his past election campaign. I want to say now that even in defeat, Mr. Trudeau showed himself a true leader. His love for his country and his concern for the well-being of his party. What he did in resigning constitutes a strategic retreat so that his party can rebuild and gain new strength across the country. And it's too bad that other political defeated politicians can't seem to take the hint or follow Mr. Trudeau's good example. And I am talking here of Dave Barrett.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think the resignation of Mr. Trudeau came at the right time. I may be alone in this. And as for Mr. Phillips trying for the leadership of the party, I've only a Christmas message. Ho, ho, ho.
That was very good. That was very good. I'm sorry Art didn't hear it. I'll tell him about it as soon as I see him. One message for Art Phillips as leader. Ho, ho, ho. Oh dear. People can be cruel. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
I want to say that I've been concerned right from the beginning with some of Mr. Clark's policies, especially regarding Petro-Canada and, of course, the other obvious ones. But now I'm worried, will he go? He has the opportunity now to go ahead with his plans for Petro-Canada. He's got nothing to stop him.
Correct.
And I'm worried about that because as a Canadian citizen, irrespective of my politics, I feel that this is our property. This belongs to Canadians. We should have a right to have a say in what happens to it.
In other words, you're fearful that Trudeau's resignation will give Joe Clark a minority steamroller, if there is such a thing.
To stop him now.
No, it's a good point, and I'll put that straight to Joe when he comes in here on Friday morning. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I think Prime Minister Trudeau conducted himself with a great amount of dignity throughout the whole time, in the last period of the year. And I'm very sad about him leaving.
Good.
Okay?
Who do you want to see as a leader of the Liberal Party?
Oh, I wouldn't mind Art Phillips.
Wouldn't mind Art Phillips?
No. I don't know very much about John Turner, though, but I like Art Phillips. I've liked him all along while he was mayor of Vancouver and everything, so I wouldn't mind.
John Turner has one great advantage. He's totally fluently bilingual and equally charming in both languages, and I would say that's one of his biggest possible assets.
I believe in bilingualism.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think it's absolutely devastating that we should lose the most intelligent man in Canadian history. Now,
I don't think you can say he was the most intelligent man. Erudite, well-educated, smooth.
Man in Canadian history.
He wasn't intelligent enough to win the last election.
He didn't lose Candu. He didn't lose Petro-Can. He didn't lose a lot of things.
He created Petro-Can. He also created Candu, but that wasn't such a good deal for us, although it was a good Eastern Canadian industry.
Joe Clark, who lost Candu.
Joe, I suppose in Florida lost a large chunk of Candu, and they're going to sell part of Petro-Can. I agree on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, who do you want to see replace Trudeau?
I don't want to see anyone replace him.
Somebody's got to replace him.
Replace a man of that intelligence. You can't replace a man of that intelligence.
You mean to say the Liberals should fold up their tents and go away?
They should go and look to Jesus or something.
Thank you, sir. I presume he wasn't swearing, but was using it as an exaggeration. Go ahead, please.
I feel like this last gentleman. I think it's absolutely... I feel very sorry for the country because Mr. Trudeau was so well respected all over the world. Look at the standing ovation he got in the United States when he was before the Senate and that. There was just glowing reports from him all the time. And look what they say about Clark.
Well, you have your opinion. I'm not going to give mine. After the break. Program note. I had planned some other material this morning, specifically the appearance of the Registrar of the College of Dental Surgeons, to go over the story that I presented last week about the woman who ended her life. And the Registrar has kindly consented, all being well, to come back tomorrow morning off the top at 9 o'clock, because it wouldn't be fair to bring it in now when we've been distracted by a major political story, and we may still be speaking to some major political figures in the East. So you can expect that program tomorrow morning on Webster. We also have a program that I've been trying to do for some while about my old friend Petronella Nelawag. Remember the woman that clobbered me over the head verbally at the Social Credit Walkabout? Brian went over there and did a story on Petronella Nelawag's problem about the floodplain. And it's an interesting story, and Petronella has a point. May manage to squeeze that in this morning because it's a shorter story. In the meantime, I'm going to continue with your reaction to what has happened this morning, if you have lost the drift. That Trudeau at 11:15 Ottawa time, 8:15 Vancouver time, without any notice, nobody in Ottawa knew about it even last night at midnight, outside of Pierre Trudeau himself, it would appear, quit. And there's going to be a leadership convention in March to pick a new leader for the Liberal Party. The old days of the party leader switching from French to English to French, I think, have long gone. Not that long gone. When Pearson was defeated, he brought in the three wise men, Marchand, Pelletier, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And at that time, the fellow who really had been chosen with the mantle, the potential mantle, was not Trudeau. It was Marchand. It wasn't Pelletier. It was Marchand. But Marchand didn't fit the bill. And by happenstance only, I think at that time, an English-speaking prime minister was followed by a French-speaking, by a bilingual prime minister. And, you know, it's funny to say, but true. It's almost essential. In fact, it is essential that the Prime Minister of this country be totally bilingual, for which Joe Clark, bless his cotton socks, deserves a bit of credit. His French is not, you know, totally incredibly emotionally fluent, but it seems to be totally incredibly competent. And when I was watching him on Hansard the other night, when he's asked a question in English by Jean Chretien, and Chretien asks it in English, and Clark answers it in French, you know, like to the language born, for which he must be given a considerable amount of credit, because you can't have a Prime Minister of this country who can't walk down the street in Trois-Rivières and say, only bonjour, madame, bonjour, comment ça va? If it's going to be one country, at least they've got to have a prime minister who can speak to people in both languages. I suppose that's one of the big built-in advantages of John Turner, if he's still a serious contender. The only thing I've got against Turner, not the fact that he once was in the papers as dating Princess Margaret 25, 30 years ago, and he hates to be reminded of it, but the fact that when he was the Minister of Finance and when he did walk away, he kept his mouth shut. He didn't exert the leadership. If things were bad enough for Turner to walk away at that time, they were bad enough for him to tell us in broad terms what was wrong with Trudeau's government. But he didn't. He just set up a kind of undercover organization where he talked to businessmen and cut away at the feet of the Liberal government from his particular point of view. However, he'll be a major contender, there is no doubt about that. Donald MacDonald, the other big boy, when he resigned as Minister of Finance, and that, of course, is always the kiss of death for a politician to become Minister of Finance in a time of inflation, we were told at that time that MacDonald was resigning because of extreme personal, I think it was family illness. But anyway, he couldn't take the standard gaff anymore. But now it seems that the Liberals have been secretly meeting with MacDonald in Toronto to bring him back as one of the principal contenders. Perrault said this morning, somebody always comes up as leader of the party. I wish, and this is a hopeless, vain, ill-considered wish, I wish the Prime Minister of a country was picked from among the members elected to the House of Commons on their own merits, not picked at a leadership convention by delegates whose motives may sometimes be more parochial than national. You know, the Liberal Party never forgets, not as the Tory Party. And many of those people who supported John Turner when he had a strong base in the West at the time of the Trudeau Leadership Convention were kept on the Liberal blacklists for years. If you don't support the guy who eventually becomes the Prime Minister through the Leadership Convention, you're a bad Liberal or a bad Tory, you know. It's a very kind of incestuous operation. I'm convinced that at any given time, with 280-some members of the House of Commons, that if a real national crisis arrives and the leaders of the party cannot control the vote in the House of Commons, that an individual would arise from within the House of Commons. But that's old-fashioned. You know, I belong in the last century. There's lots of people tell me that anyway. Victoria! No, where? Victoria, go ahead, please.
Victoria will do.
Yes, yes.
I'm a Western Canadian, a resident of Victoria, and a former Liberal. I think Trudeau has done the right thing. He's just about 3 years too late doing it. He's done more damage to the Liberal Party than any other previous leader, and I'm very pleased to see him get out, and I hope that we can now get a Western Canadian to run as leader of the Liberal Party. Those are my comments.
Name one.
I think Turner would be all right. He's not a Western Canadian, but I think he would be a good one to do it.
He's a kind of a half-Western Canadian, isn't he?
Yeah.
Certainly is an attractive, charming personality, totally fluently bilingual, and he was Minister of Finance.
I think Webster would be the one.
Oh, don't be stupid. Me a Liberal?
Oh, I'm not going on that. I'm just going as Prime Minister. I think you'd be a terrific man in that position.
Now, that's something else again. But we'll delicately bow out of that particular arena for a very simple reason. And this shouldn't happen to potential Prime Ministers. My wife wouldn't let me. Well, you think I'm joking? I'm not. Not tears this morning. I've got a bit of a cold. Where is that, please? 100 Mile House.
Oh, hello, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Jack, I'm tired of some of these bleeding hearts for Trudeau. I've got only one good thing to say about him and three bad. The good thing is that he was the finest orator and debater Canada has ever seen, in my time anyway. But the bad, first, the country is immeasurably in greater debt 11 years later than it was when he came to power. Second, Canada has never been so torn with strife since Confederation vis-a-vis Francophones versus the rest. And third, during Trudeau's reign, Canada has been allowed to follow the sick, ruinous trade union power ploy which has wrecked Great Britain since World War II, and is having the same effect here, and oddly enough, by British immigrants from your Scotland and my England. Thank you, Jack.
Just don't go away for a second. No, just listen to me for a second. I would agree that Trudeau was the man who gave power beyond belief to the civil service.
Yeah.
And Trudeau was the man who did not and could not and didn't really care about controlling the extent of the explosion of the mandarins, you know.
Right.
But you can't blame him for the trade union bit. That's something totally different. What I would say was that looking back on it now coolly and calmly, the October Revolution of 1970 was handled in far too tough a fashion. And knowing what we know now about the RCMP, the Quebec Provincial Police, we know really that the War Measures Act was not, and I was one of those who was fooled at the time, in fact necessary. And that was one of his great sins. I'm going to be talking to Robert Andras, former Treasury Board Chairman under the Liberal government, immediately after this break. We'll have a filmed comment for you from Joe Clark, the Prime Minister, very shortly. But on the telephone is a man you've seen on this programme a couple of times, Bob Andras, Liberal MP for, I always forget it, Thunder Bay, Nipissing. Is that right, Bob?
That's right.
Bob, It's not that long since you were a Liberal cabinet minister, secure in the knowledge that you were going on forever. Were you shocked by the timing of today's announcement?
Well, Jack, you know, we very much regret the fact that that this has happened. It was not totally unanticipated. The question of timing and the moment of the announcement came in spite of that knowledge that it probably could happen sooner or later as a bit of a surprise this morning. And there were some, you know, very sober and constrained people when Pierre came into the caucus and told us about his resignation and the call for a leadership convention in March. So shock, yes, I guess there's a bit of that too.
There wasn't even a whisper about it round the hill yesterday, was there, Bob?
Not in those precise terms. You know, we Liberals have never, over the years with Mackenzie, Pearson, and you know, we Liberals have never, and we've been successful in doing it this way. We've always felt in the end that the leader had the responsibility to make that very lonely and important decision. And of course, Trudeau has done it, and I must say that he did it very gracefully and with a great deal of obvious emotion this morning.
Tell me, do you think one of his thoughts might have been that this would automatically supply some stability to Clark, in that Clark cannot now, in the obvious common sense basis, be defeated before, say, next fall at the earliest?
Well, I would question your timing on that, and but coming back as to whether this influenced the Trudeau's decision or not, I think it probably did. My own speculation, Jack, is that Pierre Trudeau weighed very carefully the effect of his staying or leaving on the results of the Quebec referendum, which is anticipated next early spring. He had said after the election that he would stay until the referendum, and of course this has been one of his primary reasons for being and remaining in politics, his concern to keep Quebec within Confederation, which I think is, you know, a very commendable and understandable motivation.
But he must have decided that his lack of official presence during the referendum will not hinder a victory for the Federalists.
I think he must have weighed that very carefully, Jack, and I would anticipate that he had said to himself, can I have as much or more effect by being free and a strong and very much respected and prestigious person battling in Quebec for federalism as an independent, private, but still very well known and regarded person.
You've just reminded me.
Whether he would have less effect as the leader of a party about whom, let's face it, there were beginning to be the muted comments natural after the loss of an election. So I think he chose this route and waited and said, I can probably be more effective as Pierre Trudeau under these circumstances than the other way, and that must have been a consideration. The other factor you mentioned, that is as a result of the by-elections yesterday, I guess it was, and the tightness of the situation in the House and the anticipated possibility of an early election next, from any time on now, may have been another factor, but I really think he weighed the Quebec situation as the primary.
Are you telling me he will still campaign as a prestigious individual on the referendum issue?
I would have no doubt about that whatsoever.
Thank you. Bob, one final routine question.
Yeah.
Will you be a candidate for the leadership?
Well, Jack, you know, in politics one never says never, no and forever. I've put a lot of time into this party and this country, and I'll be extremely interested in making sure that the leadership of the Liberal Party goes to somebody responsible and good for the country. If there are others, that's fine, but, you know, I'm not going to abdicate my interest and my responsibility. I'm going to wait and see at the moment.
My thanks to Bob Andras, former Minister, Treasury Board Chairman and Liberal MP still for Thunder Bay and Nipissing. Thanks again, Mr. Andras.
Good to talk to you, Jack.
Bye. Gordon.
Yes.
Gordon Gibson.
Good morning, Jack Webster.
Am I speaking to you locally, or are you in Ottawa too?
No, I haven't been in Ottawa for months, Jack. I didn't get elected.
I thought maybe you'd heard about this yesterday. This, of course, is Gordon Gibson, former leader of the Liberal Party, who quit to run in the in the recent federal election and didn't make it. You've been a man who's always been very close to the Prime Minister, Gordon Gibson. Explain the move to me.
Well,
Analyze it, I mean. Analyze today's startling development.
Well, the first thing everybody would note, I guess, is that it's very much in character with Mr. Trudeau to do the unexpected. I think it was absolutely timely. I think his timing was very good. He will be able to concentrate on that thing which interests him most, and I just heard you discussing that with Bob Andras, namely the Quebec situation, which remains a very dicey one, with Levesque trying to talk his citizens into a so-called strike vote, really, and that has to be fought because it's a real danger. Beyond that, I think in the rest of the country, it was timely as well, because it was time for a change. The last election demonstrated that very clearly.
He's been leader for nearly 12 years now, hasn't he?
That's right.
12 years now. You don't think that he's just going to fold his tent and go away. You think that he, like Andras, you believe that he will campaign as a prestigious person in Quebec?
I have no question about that at all. On the other hand, I would think that he would also welcome and has very much earned the opportunity to a little bit of private life now. That's a pretty rough job he's had for 12 years.
Yeah, a very rough job indeed, no matter who's doing the job. Now, let's talk about the leadership potential within the party that we know of right now, Gordon. You know them all. Without pinning your hat to any coat, could you give me a few names?
Well, the obvious two big names are the Torontonians, Turner and MacDonald. I would think that someone out of Quebec will certainly run, perhaps more than one.
Perhaps Jean Chretien, perhaps Jean-Luc Pepin?
Chretien would be the most logical name. Pepin is an Ontario member now,
oh, yeah,
a Francophone member, of course. I would expect him. Alan McEachern, a little bit of a question mark. He ran, of course, back in 1968, but someone from the Maritimes should be in there, and I would expect Alan's name as well.
Will it be the old business of a number of candidates running, as in the Clark situation, and then dealing from convention votes to make sure that the least damaging man becomes Prime Minister?
I would expect quite a number of candidates to be running. When it comes to the convention, I don't really think any candidates can deal with their votes. It's a secret ballot at conventions, and people may try to go over on the floor and endorse this candidate or that, but their delegates won't necessarily follow them. But I would expect, unless some overwhelming consensus develops, that it would be quite similar to the Tory convention, with a large number of ballots and people having a lot of time to think in between times.
One very basic old-fashioned question, Gordon, simply as this. Have the old days gone when a French-speaking bilingual Prime Minister had to be followed by an English-speaking Anglo-Saxon WASP-type Prime Minister?
I think that is a very strong tradition in the Liberal Party, and I would...
Me on that answer.
Well, I think quite apart from the tradition, which is I think in narrow partisan terms and perhaps in national terms too, a very good tradition. Quite apart from that, what the country needs now at the leadership of the national government, I think, is an Anglophone, in order to more easily deal in a way that's accepted all across the country with the evolving situation in Quebec. And remember that people in Western Canada have a great community of interest with a lot of the thinking that's going on in Quebec these days. We need a renewed federalism in Canada as well, from our point of view as Westerners.
In fact, we really need a Western Anglophone Prime Minister.
Might be a very good time for that.
Will Gordon Gibson be a candidate at any stage?
Jack, I hadn't given any thought to it till this morning, even though people have been talking to me about it. It's all such a surprise, I don't know what to think.
Are you bilingual?
I used to be. I'm very modest about that now. One loses their...
Anyway, one final... Anton wants to talk to you, so don't hang up the telephone, but first of all, I just want to put this point to you. This now solidifies Clark in power until a time of his choice in the fall of next year. Right?
Not necessarily the fall. I would say that any time after March, a new Liberal leader, were he able to muster sufficient support in Parliament and were the issue sufficiently good, might try and muster a vote to defeat the government. But
similarly, Clark could be ready to jump before the new Liberal leader had got into bed, you might say.
Yes, but he'd have to be careful in doing that, because if Mr. Clark himself called an election too soon after the Liberal convention, he'd have to cope with the fact that the new Liberal leader had just received a great deal of publicity and wouldn't at that stage have had too much of an opportunity to make mistakes.
Ah, that's memories of Stanfield and Trudeau. Right? Hey, Gordon, grateful for your political wisdom again. Thank you very much indeed. Another time I'll ask you what were his greatest achievements and what were his biggest boo-boos. But thanks to Gordon Gibson, presently an unemployed Liberal. Is that correct?
That's right, Jack.
Hold on, Gordon Gibson, while I take this break. On the telephone now from Ottawa, I have Jean Chretien, former Minister of Finance in the Liberal government. Jean Chretien, the first question is not on today's development, it's on the future. Jean, will you be running as a candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party in March?
I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, of course you should.
You know, everyone says that, the next leader should be an Anglophone. I'm a Francophone.
I thought that old-fashioned business was down the tube, Jean. I thought we picked, or your parties picked the best man, not what language he spoke at birth.
I know, but if you think I'm the best man, I would consider that.
Well, now, I'm not a member of the Liberal Party, Jean. You are tricking me. You are trapping me. But I predict that you will be one of the candidates for the leadership of the Liberal Party, right?
Oh, perhaps, don't put money on that one, Jack.
Well, okay. Now tell me the story. What happened? Why did it happen today, Jean Chretien?
Well, I am surprised as everybody else. I had discussed with him, some aspect of the problem not long ago, and I had a kind of an impression after the discussion that, he was about to make up his mind, and but I never expected him to be that fast. But I do think that he wanted to do that in such a way to take everybody by surprise, and he have achieved it. When the people were telling me that he wanted to hang around, I used to tell them that first, in the Liberal Party, we always have been very civilized with our leader. We don't shoot them.
Right.
Second, all of our leaders have shown a lot of judgment when their time came to go.
Right.
And that, it was the case with Pearson, it was the case with Mackenzie King, it was the case with Louis Saint Laurent, and I knew that Mr. Trudeau will make a decision that will suit him and suit the party at the same time.
In other words, you're telling me that the Liberals have never suffered from the Diefenbaker syndrome.
No, the Liberals don't shoot in circle, they shoot the enemy.
Now, how important, though, does this mean, Jean Chretien, that Trudeau regards the Quebec referendum as safely won under the federal Liberals and under Claude Ryan in Quebec? In other words, did he say to himself, I am not needed for the referendum, that is going to be okay against the PQ?
I have not discussed this aspect of his decision as yet with him. That does not mean that because he is no more the leader of the party that he did not want to participate in the referendum. On the contrary, I do think that, I tend to look at the positive aspect of the problem and not being any more a political personality in the sense that he could gain something out of it. Perhaps he made a decision that his voice will have a different angle that could be still very useful. And as the responsible of the Liberal Party for the referendum on the federal scene for the referendum in Quebec, I will have to tell you that I will urge Mr. Trudeau, I'm sure he will accept, to participate as strongly as we had planned for him before.
In other words, you, as being the federal minister for Quebec, you will say to Pierre, come and help us in the referendum, and you're sure he will respond?
There is no doubt about it, because, he got 62% of the popular vote in the last provincial election, federal election, and it's more than anybody else ever had in years in Quebec.
Okay, next point, Jean Chretien.
Because he is himself extremely respected, by the Quebecers, and of course some people in Quebec will be disappointed that he resigned, but in politics there is a time for one to come and a time for one to go.
In other words, you're telling me that the ordinary Quebecois will not feel that he has let them down by resigning as leader of the party. They will not feel that.
No, I don't think so. I do think that most of the Quebecers will respect his judgment that after 11 years as a leader of the party and prime minister, that he was entitled to decide to do something else, and and everyone.
But Jean Chretien, it's going to make it very tough for you in the House of Commons between now and next spring, is it not? With Clark and Crosby being able to refer to you as a lame duck party with no leader.
No, I'm not preoccupied about it, because I think that they must realize that there will be a liberal convention. They must realize too that that there was no increase in their popularity since the election. That all their decisions have not well accepted by the public. And second, they must be afraid that the Liberal Party with a new leader will perhaps be even tougher for them to compete with next election.
Right. Joe Clark said this morning, Jean, that he does not intend to call an early election to take advantage of the Liberals while they search for a successor. In other words, he's not going to call he's not going to call a quickie election.
Do that because the people will not accept it very well, that to use a period like that to call an election. But if they call an election, we'll go anyway, and
Jean Chretien, thank you.
But it will be very unfair and against the national
interest
tradition of fairness, in politics.
Understood. My thanks to you, Jean Chretien, and I'll see you at the Liberal Leadership Convention in March.
I will be at least a delegate.
At least a delegate, I say.
Goodbye.
Au revoir, au revoir, au revoir. Ron Huntington.
Hello, Jack.
Ron, could you hold on during the break, and then we can have a little natter about Trudeau's walkaway this morning?
I'm in need of a break myself, too, Jack.
Okay, go get a cup of coffee, and I'll get a cup of coffee, too, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Hold on, Ron.
The law of the just society is something towards which you tend. It isn't something that you bring in overnight.
The very first Conservative I've spoken to will be speaking to this morning is Ron Huntington, Industry and Small Business Portfolio in the Clark Cabinet. Ron, how did you see this? Were you surprised? How do you assess it?
Not really surprised, Jack. One just had to watch the gentleman across the floor of the House to know that he was doing a lot of thinking and rationalizing, and with his normal political astuteness was putting the story together. And I guess the various little volcanoes that were starting in the caucus, I guess he's shown his true sense of a leader in resigning and calling for a leadership convention.
In other words, the disco heat last weekend, the weekend before last, and probably annoyed him so much that it helped him to make up his mind specifically now.
I don't think the disco heat would trouble him. He's a very strong individual. He's been a very famous leader in Canada. I don't know of any other political leader in a democratic society that has been able to take a philosophy that he believed deeply in and move it so far down the road as Pierre Trudeau. I think we have to recognize that he's had a stroke of genius and brilliance in being able to manage and manipulate a system to deliver what he deeply feels in. I think the people in the last election started to wake up to the fact that the ship of state had truly changed direction in the course through the night, and that they reacted to it. Now, our problem is that we have a minority or very close to minority government, and they are not giving us too much of a break in the House to get the government business onto the floor of the House.
But surely,
so far.
surely that's all changed as of now. Surely your government under Mr. Clark is now totally stable, cannot be defeated, unless you choose to be defeated, because obviously the Liberals will stay away in the necessary handfuls, even to pass your Petrocan legislation or your mortgage property tax legislation, because they can't go into an election without a leader.
Well, Jack, apart from that, the managing of the House time is essential if we are to get the image out that we have been doing an awful lot of work in the first 6 months in office, and that we do have some very solid and meaningful pieces of legislation to get onto the floor of the House.
Well, that's in your hands, surely.
They've tied us up completely, slowed us right down, trying to get through the mechanics of the system, like the Ways and Means bills left over from the previous government. We've been tied up totally just trying to get those through the system, so we haven't had a chance to get our new stuff onto the floor of the House.
Well, maybe you'll have that chance now, because they didn't beat you on the floor of the House.
Well, it would appear that we're going to be suffering a very short Christmas break in order to take advantage of every single day that's possible in order to get that business onto the floor of the House, to show the people that we do have some very solid things in place.
Are you glad to see him go?
I'm glad to see him go for the country's sake, although I must say you know that I have got into the political arena because I was very, very concerned at the direction that he was leading the country. I've got to secretly say that I carried an admiration for the man's abilities.
But you didn't like his left-wing policies, or his growth of the civil service, or his unrestricted spending.
Well, and the other thing, Jack, is he demilitarized the nation, and he's almost deindustrialized it. So in those areas, I've got a very, very heavy job of work to do in trying to bring it back. One of the great problems we have today is that the lead times on programs are so intense that we've already got programs and government commitments in place.
Okay, one last question, Ron. I'll interview you on Tory policies another time. Who do you want to see as leader of the Liberal Party? MacDonald, big business? Turner, big business? Or Art Phillips?
Well, Art Phillips can try. I wouldn't mind seeing Art Phillips. It'd be a piece of cake for us.
Thank you very much indeed, Ron Huntington, Tory Minister for Industry and Small Business. Thank you, Ron Huntington, and I'll be back after the break for a few phone calls.
79 of them, 21 more.
Couple of pieces of wire copy just to wrap out our coverage this morning of this political bombshell that Trudeau retired at 8:15 Vancouver time, announced he's stepping down as leader of the Liberal Party convention in March. It was June 25th, 1968 that Trudeau mania swept the country. Remember that? October 1970, the War Measures Act. March 71, he married Margaret Sinclair. October 72, he was very nearly swept out of office, but he managed to hang on and beat Stanfield. How quickly one forgets. Clark, as I told you, said he is not going to take advantage of this situation to call an early election, will govern as long as possible, and praised on behalf of all Canadians the service as Prime Minister of this country that Trudeau gave Canada for 11 difficult, singular and dramatic years. Next thing, Davy Barrett, NDP leader, says Pierre Trudeau did not complete one particular major political mission, and that was to produce a new constitution for Canada, and that while Trudeau remains a major factor on the political scene, his record still has to be evaluated by history. Jean Sauvé, who was one of Trudeau's cabinet ministers, said this morning, he put in front of the Canadian people the true nature of the country. He tried to show Canadians that the country is two people wanting to speak two different languages and also wanting to live together. She didn't know how much the difficulties in his family life prompted him to quit. And from the coverage of the press conference, we now learn that Trudeau, not of the press conference, Trudeau wept as he made his announcements to the caucus, the MPs that is, and the senators. He was more contained, it says here, when he met reporters. One of the surprising things this morning from Gordon Gibson came when he said, yes, the old system should still apply, that an Anglophone should now follow a Francophone as Prime Minister of the country. I thought that was down the tube. But if Gordon Gibson says it isn't, it isn't. And of course, with the situation in Quebec as it is right now, it may well be that an Anglophone will be essential to reflect the new power and status and difficulties of Western Canada in relation to Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan, the wealthy parts of the nation. In his statement at the end, it says this: I will make long and sustained efforts to build the kind of Canada that most of us want. I feel it's time for a new leader to take up this work. It has been an exciting morning, to say the least. And one doesn't think of the personal things involved for a man like Trudeau. But the fact remains he was Prime Minister for 10, 11 years, did a lot of things, some well, some badly. And now he's gone. To resurface, as he once said, I think, that if he ever left Ottawa, he would resurface in Quebec to fight for Canadian unity. Can't ask for much better than that, can you? Webster and Linda after the break.
Tonight there's a BCTV news special at 8:30 called The End of an Era.
8:30 till 9:30 p.m. on Trudeau, The End of an Era. There was something else. I want to say thanks to the Webster crew this morning specifically for producing that, and all those people in no time flat whatsoever. Dentists tomorrow morning will follow the Trudeau story, of course, on the special tonight on Trudeau, 8:30 p.m. Thank you.
I'm stepping down from the leadership and asking the national executive of the party to call a convention for next March to choose a new leader. There's no easy way or ideal time to leave, and there are always strong public and private reasons, both for going and for staying on. At a point in time, one simply makes the decision as to what is best. I will turn over a healthy party to my successor. We have 114 energetic and dedicated members of Parliament, who in many cases have been my friends and colleagues since I came to Ottawa. Many senators have also been loyal supporters. I'm grateful to them and to all the Liberals throughout the land for having given me such an extraordinary opportunity to serve my country.